Welcome to the Fearless Faith Radio Show. Each week, we bring inspirational guests, stories, scripture, and life lessons to help us all be unapologetic followers of Christ who stand fearlessly firm in our faith, personally and professionally. Welcome to the Fearless Faith Radio Show. I'm your host, Mary Grothe, and today I am joined by guest Rob Lohman. We met at a Denver chapter of a Christian executive meetup group, and immediately upon shaking hands and hearing each other's stories, I knew we had a lot in common. He handed me his book, and immediately we said, we've got to get to know each other, and hey, we've got podcasts. We should be on the show. And so I'm so excited to have him here today. So Rob, welcome to the show.
Awesome to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So Rob, I'm going to read this intro, but his story is so much better than anything I could ever say myself. So I have a short intro for him, and then he's going to take it over. And I cannot wait to hear his story because I haven't heard it in detail yet. But Rob is a passionate addiction expert, pulling people out of their rut in life. Oh, amen. I can speak to that. As an interventionist, author, and podcaster, we can't wait to hear your story.
Yeah, it's the wild journey of just growing up as a Christian and going way off track in my life, and then eventually coming back. And just always, I feel like there's this cool cartoon image I found of like Jesus Christ just holding this marionette strings, right? And and it's just like the old marionette strings that the devil used to have on me, and he just takes his sword and cuts those strings, and it's just like falling at his feet. And those strings that the enemy had on me for so long were just, it's almost like they were steel and in my mind, like unbreakable. But good thing is I serve an amazing God that can, bring me back. And I never lost my faith. I just lost, I'd say, the devotion to my faith throughout my journey of alcohol, drugs, gambling, all the stuff. Just add the word addiction. I probably had that one. And it was a scary, dark journey that I had, but God is good, and He brought me out of that, and just grateful to share that as experiences with your audiences today, and I'm sure people can relate to something along the lines of addiction, bankruptcy, divorce, self-loathing, depression, anxiety, transformation, freedom, excitement for the Lord, and just a devoted follower. So that's my story right there. You got it. That's it. We'll wrap it up from there.
Yeah, we need to buckle up. I'm so ready for this story. I have experienced, I think, every single thing that you just shared on that list. I haven't exactly filed bankruptcy, but there's been a few points in my life when I was down to, a buck to my name with a lot of accrued debt, but the Lord brought me out of that, which is amazing. Anyway, I cannot wait to hear this. Tell us everything,
Yeah, and that was fun when I met you. We just it's kind of like had very similar stories with different ingredients in them, right? But
yeah,
but just how amazing God is. And I was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I grew up in a Christian home, and I loved living in Fort Wayne because my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, it was just like innocence, right? From 0 to age 9 when we moved down to Texas. But I love living in Indiana. I love my family. I love celebrating Christmas, and it was just, I don't know. I guess that was like the purest season in my life. Just as a kid, right? I wasn't tainted by much, and just, I don't know, it was just simple living. And then we moved to Texas in 1980. And if you've ever been kind of transplanted somewhere and never felt like you fit in.
Yeah.
That was kind of like myself in Texas. And it was just a different culture. People talk really weird down there. And, but I lost that home family connection. And we moved down there for my dad's job, and just, I didn't fall into the wrong crowd, if you will. I just fell into, it was really weird, Mary. It was a whole group of like Christians, right? They went to church and they did like wildlife and young life and those things, but there was still drinking and partying and carousing going on. So just because you're in a Christian environment doesn't mean we're doing Christian things. And so I started drinking at 14 years old was my start of alcohol. And you hear some people's stories, and there was like a dramatic moment that happened.
Right.
It's like, oh, I could see why you would drink, abuse, all those things. But for me, it was just this allure of the enjoyment of alcohol. I mean, it was around a lot at our family parties, and every summer we'd spend at our lake house in Michigan, and it was just drinking was around. but I never saw the problems of drinking. This, especially like social media now and the movies, it's romances the excitement of drinking, right? And it looks cool.
Oh yeah.
And so that's kind of just what it was. It was, I'll just say my start in drinking was the excitement, the allure of it. And it just grabbed me hook, line, and sinker. And it wasn't like an obsession in my life, but it was just what we did as a community of friends. Just alcohol was there. Gambling started around age 16. And I loved gambling. It was kind of like I was chasing that dopamine rush. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. The continual just chase of excitement. And then the insecurities started kicking up. And it was just masking my bravado with alcohol that I was just really kind of didn't feel like I fit in a lot of places. So I felt like I crafted this art of being a chameleon to just fit in. Then I went to college. And I was going to college to become a doctor. I want to back up real quick, Mary. I always say that whenever alcohol and potential were in the same room in my life, alcohol won every time.
Whoa.
And I felt like I was a really good swimmer in high school, and I still love swimming today. Coming out of my neck injury and stuff, I might be able to start swimming soon, which would be cool.
Yay, good.
Yeah, recent neck injury people. But alcohol and potential, they fought each other in my life a lot. And it was just easier to give in than to push through.
Yeah, that's common for a lot of people. I remember that in my early 20s when I sometimes joke around, corporate America saved my life, because I was in the bar industry and club industry and working terrible hours and doing terrible things. And that was just a constant cycle of alcohol and drugs. But when I took that full-time corporate job, even entry level, at the time, I saw so much hope and promise. But the thing, you're exactly right, that always went against the potential was the alcohol. And I remember I gave that job such an extreme dedication, truly the first thing I had ever dedicated myself to, in a 4-year period since I had left school, because I used to be so strong academically and so focused, and I wasn't drinking in high school. Like, I was very focused, very smart, but it was the first time I had really started to apply myself again in something. And I remember that the potential was in constant conflict with that desire to have a drink. And as soon as that workday was done and the happy hour started, or the getting home from work and opening the fridge in the garage, not even getting the alcohol out of the fridge in the kitchen, just to crack it open before I could even get in. But I remember it always being in conflict. And I know you have a lot more to share. Sorry for derailing here, but I do remember when I felt like I was losing control of my life. I had a professional sales role. I was the number 1 rep. I had sold more than number 2 and 3 combined in my first year in sales. I mean, unbelievable press recognition, internally awards, plaques, walking the stage, and of course, income. The second year, I blew that number out of the water. I did more than the first year, but I went through a really serious breakup. And when I did that, I adopted a nighttime partying lifestyle in addition to the excessive drinking that kept me out late every night. And I moved into downtown Denver and bought a loft down there. I had 2 homes. I put myself right in the heart of sin and destruction. And that's when my sales career started to fall apart, when I couldn't get out of bed in the morning, when those habits that made me so successful, which were being the first one in the office, being diligent and working, and just all the things that I did, the alcohol started to take over and it took away my potential. And when I started struggling in that sales year, that's when things just started spiraling out of control for me. And it was just a slow kill until I hit my rock bottom. But that, I've never heard anybody phrase it that way. And it is very true. And once I started drinking, I tried to figure out how to do it functionally. Plus, I feel like when I was younger, other people feel this way. Like when I was younger, I feel like I could go get hammered and wake up and be like, okay, ready for the day.
Yeah, totally.
Now it's like, there's like a sip of wine and I seem like, I don't feel good. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And it's like a slow fade. There's that one song by, I think it's Casting Crowns, a slow fade, even though that talks about having an affair or something like that. But it's like addiction and whatever the thing is, right? That's taking us away, taking me away, taking you away from that journey. And it was just a scary place. I mean, having all these friends and connections and making money, right? And like my real estate career when I was living in Indiana, I had a lot of different career journeys, put it that way. And alcohol was definitely a part of those changes in a sense of like, oh, I can make more money over here, or there's a shiny object, and like so many kids are diagnosed with like ADD, ADHD these days. Like I probably would have been a candidate for that as a kid, but I'm glad my parents never went that way, because then it's just this thing, right, that now I'm identified by for the rest of my life, which really is just learning how to focus my energy in a positive way. And so senior year of high school, I quit swimming, because it was either quit swimming or quit drinking, because we would get drunk and we'd go like before practice and drink during the day and go back to school. Right. And it was just kind of that thing. And I'm like, well, I think I'm just going to quit swimming. And then I went to college to become a doctor. And here's all these great opportunities my parents gave me to become a doctor. But yet all the things of college was just partying and drinking. And if I had to get an A, I would buckle down real hard, Mary, and I would just easily get an A on the next test. And I remember graduation day, these moments in your life, like when you had promotions and things and people are celebrating you and your job you were talking about. Graduating from college in 4 years was great, because I was the first guy in our family to like do that. Yeah. And so my aunts, uncles, like all these people were there, and I'm sitting in the morning having breakfast with my family and thinking, I don't even know if I'm going to graduate. Nobody else knows that in my family. And I'm sitting there and just like, I'm waiting for the phone to ring. And one of my teachers called me and said, Lohman, get your butt to my office right now. And I'm sitting there thinking, and this is like hours before graduation, right? And I'm sitting he calls me up to his office and he goes, what have you been doing all semester? And I'm just sitting there like thinking, I'm not going to graduate. I mean, this is so embarrassing, and my parents and the money they spent on college. And he goes, there were 5 sections to this test, and he starts flipping them. He's like 99, 100, 98. He's like, I've never seen grades like this in my whole tenure here at DePauw. What have you been doing? And I just said, did I graduate? And he said, yes. I just left the office. Didn't tell my parents. I'd never told my parents that till like 10 years later.
Oh, wow.
But that was my life. And all the while, I always believed God was keeping me alive for a bigger purpose. And now looking at what I do now as an interventionist and a coach, helping people with addictions and break free from feeling stuck in their recovery, right? I look at all those experiences and I've been through a lot. And that's just like 10% of it, what we just talked about. But God preparing me in some ways. And sometimes I get annoyed with that kind of thing. It's like, well, why do I have to go through all of that? And I haven't even gotten to like prison and sobriety and suicide and all that stuff yet, right? But I was like, why do I have to go through all that to now be able to help people with that message? Couldn't there have been something else that would have been less painful in my life?
Yeah.
So it's just trusting God in the process. But, it was kind of like college, graduated in 4 years and went on and just did a series of different things and eventually found sobriety after massive desperation in 2001. So it's been a little while for the sobriety piece of this, but I just ran hard and I was an impulsive guy and I'd never really thought of the consequences and just figured out how could I manipulate things to get in my way, because like gambling was out of control, dating was out of control, spending was out of control. I mean, I heard this in recovery once, that my life was spinning out of control faster than I could lower my standards. And my standards had gotten pretty low at that point.
Yeah,
so
I hear you.
So 2001, and I'll tell kind of like how I got sober part, and then we can dive into the rest of the journey. But about 6 months before this, I was dealing a lot with suicide ideation. And I love Dr. Neil Anderson now, if you're familiar with him, Victory Over the Darkness, Freedom in Christ Ministries now, because it's all about breaking those spiritual holds in your life. And for me, my spiritual holds were you suck, you failed, look at your life. Internally, I was completely just desperate. It was dark. I was alone, but I had a million friends, I was completely about bankrupt financially, but externally you couldn't tell. Mm-mm. So everything inside of me was just dark. And outside I was trying to act like I had it all together. Like so many people I see and talk to, it's just like, I don't want you to really know me. So I'm going to show you the guy that I want to become, but I just have no idea how to really get there. And so I was doing a lot with suicide ideation leading up to this moment, to where I would, see my car veer off on the highway and it would hit a median in the highway and my car would explode and I would see myself dead on the side of the road. And this was happening more frequently and I was completely just driving down the road, but I would see myself and I didn't want to die, but I wanted to die. Mm-hmm. Because I was dying inside. And so this one night I was hanging out in a bar in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and music, girls, everything. And all of a sudden the bar gets completely dead silent, which is horrible to have on a podcast, silence, right? But it gets
yeah, that was really awkward. Thank you.
Wasn't it? You're like, what just happened there? That was intentional, but it gets completely dead silent. And I audibly hear the words, "You're done." And then the bar get really loud again. And what I felt had happened in that moment was that God was saying, "You're done drinking finally." Wow. So I said goodbye to a friend of mine at the bar and said, "Hey, I think I'm done. Finally, I'll talk to you later." And he's like, "We'll see you tomorrow at the bar." I drove home that night feeling like something shifted in my brain and in my heart and in my soul. And something shifted. And I drove home that night feeling like I was finally done drinking, but I was also extremely intoxicated. And I get home and walked up my 12 steps to my little 1-bedroom apartment loft. And what happened next was I ended up putting about 350 pounds on my barbell on my gym in my living room, laid down on my workout bench, picked up the barbell and just unhinged my elbows to end my life that night. And what happened in that moment, what I feel happened is that like God stopped time as my elbows are literally unhinged and my dog comes over and he starts nudging my knee with his head and just looking at me like, kind of, "What are you doing, Dad?" What? And I'm just like, holy crap, who's going to feed you tomorrow? So my heart broke for my dog, which is God spelled backwards.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Yeah. And so I believe God revealed himself to me that night through my dog, Jake. And God miraculously put that barbell back on the rack because, see, I believe God carries the weight of the world. And that night, he allowed for the world to almost crash down on me so he could bring me back up. And I woke up that next morning just feeling like a peaceful man. And my aunt came and picked me up and took me to an AA meeting. And I never drank again. Just never had any cravings. It was literally just gone. For a guy that could drink 2 bottles of scotch in a day and stuff, it was wild. So that was kind of my sobriety freedom story. Wow. There's a lot more chaos in recovery, but that gets me to the recovery part of my journey of no more alcohol or drugs or tobacco or anything.
Yeah, that's incredible. I was waiting for what happened. I know that night that I had my big night of intoxication and I got in the car. I drove my car into my neighbor's front porch, which landed me in jail. And that's what started the process for me. It's so amazing how God knows how to get our attention. I feel like he was knocking at my door for so long and I didn't know him or really of him. And I remember that night when I got home from jail after staying in jail for a couple of nights, but I remember laying my head on the pillow in pain, contusions, detoxing from alcohol, concussion, laying my head on the pillow, the weight of shame and guilt and embarrassment was too much to carry. And I prayed to a God that I didn't know to just simply end my life. God, if you're real, take my life. I can't wake up tomorrow. I cannot face what I have done and who I have become. And I can't clean up this mess and no one will ever forgive me. And I'm done. And that's it. Like, if you're real, take it. And obviously I'm still here. But the journey that he placed me on after that, it took me 7 months before I got to meet him face to face. But he does it so beautifully in his time, and he wastes nothing. And I've dealt with a lot of hard and challenges and pain and grief and mistakes and consequences and heartache, most of which I've caused myself. And I know there's a lot more to your story, and I'm sitting here dragging this out, but it's incredible how he can use, and he does use, anyone and everything for the good of those who love him. And I'm so grateful that he knocked on my door for so long and never gave up on me. Similar to you, right? One night I drove drunk and I drove my car to my neighbor's house, but for the 1,000+ nights before then, or even happy hours, lunches or whatnot that I drove, and he spared my life and others.
Amen.
God's hand is everywhere and in everything. And anyway, okay, I have to lead us into our first break. Well, actually, our only break. We only do one break these days. Let me do that. On the other side of this, I want to hear the other part of your story. And I'm going to ask you the question I ask every guest, which is, what is your advice for our audience on how to have fearless faith? We'll be back in just a minute.
Every leader must learn how to connect with those that follow. Your story is the proving ground for real content that connects with your audience and moves them to action. Creator Spark is a proud sponsor of Fearless Faith Radio. To claim your free leadership content strategy session, visit creatorspark.com/fearlessfaith.
Welcome back to the Fearless Faith Radio Show. I'm your host, Mary Grothe, and we are in our interview right now with Rob Lohman, and he has shared so much of the background, very encouraging about the path to sobriety, and I am very excited to hear the rest of the story, so take it away.
Well, the crazy thing too is that night that I just shared about when my dog saved my life, which again, I still believe was God revealing himself to me. My favorite song at that time, Mary, was a song by the Pirates of the Mississippi called Feed Jake. And that was my dog's name. And the thing that broke my heart was, who's going to feed you in the morning?
Oh my gosh.
And the song goes like this. I won't sing it, but it's like, feed Jake. He's been a good dog. My best friend right to the end. If I die before I wake, feed Jake.
Wow. So that just rang right through in that moment, in the total semi-conscious intoxication. That song, the lyrics of that song came through. Who's going to feed Jake? That's unbelievable. Yeah.
And that's the way God shows up, right? Like I said, there's a million times I should have died along the way, right? And I didn't. And that was what it took to get me to this eye-opening thing of what the heck is going on with me, right? So then it became this exciting journey, the pink cloud journey of like, okay, I need to get back to church. When you get back to whatever. So I started, volunteering at youth groups and got plugged into AA and just was like Mr. AA in this pink cloud, and just loved it as we would go on camping trips as a group of people, or go and just tell stories, or go hang out before or after meetings. And for me, like, AA is what I needed. I needed that kind of community. And I tried to celebrate recovery as a Christian back then, but I just couldn't relate to the person that felt like they had sinned because they ate a couple Oreos again, right? Or just stories I couldn't relate to. I'm like, dude, I'm an alcoholic. Like, I was an idiot. Like, I need to hang out with those people. And it was great. I mean, I loved recovery. I loved getting back to kind of like my faith journey. And one thing, when I look back, I want to encourage people who are listening, like if you're starting a recovery journey or wherever, I think counseling is so key and such a key element in people's lives. Like when I coach people now, and I call it the trifecta of recovery, it's about counseling, community, and coaching. And community is the present that we're going to like and do life with people now. That's the present. The counseling is to understand the past. And the coaching is to envision the future.
Yeah.
And from the counseling perspective, I never really kind of dove in to understand little Robbie. And just to understand, like, how did I really get there? I did the steps and did the hard work, but doing like the next level, deeper work and I don't, I guess I do have regrets in my life that God has healed now still today, right? Even in recovery. And when I look back, I always encourage people like, please go explore your past deeper than you ever have so that you can really be freed from that marionette I was talking about earlier,
Yes.
the enemy's little tangents, the tentacles he still has on you, like an octopus, right?
Yes.
And my pastor friend Don McCreevy talks about the octopus, and you can cut off the octopus arm of like smoking cigarettes, but it's going to grow back. You can cut off that octopus arm of gambling, but it's going to grow back. But if you kill the octopus, it's not going to grow back. Right. So it's like getting to that core of what drives different addictions, or, the whack-a-mole, right? Well, I'm going to suppress this one and this one's going to stick its ugly head up. And so for me, like one thing I never really dealt with was my impulsivity in gambling. And that comes out later in my life and my story. I love living in the now and just enjoying the moment with people, and didn't think a whole lot about the future, which is why I love coaching now, because I love helping people see the future more instead of just whatever it might be. Like I just watched the movie The Forge last night. It's a really good Christian movie. It's about helping this young man see his potential and step into that. Right. So, anyway, so it was just a good recovery journey. And I did a couple different careers along the way, started finding things I was excited about and took chances. I mean, recovery is not meant to be boring. It's meant to be, in my opinion, adventurous, because there's a new person now.
Yeah.
Whether someone gets that point of being new in Christ is different. I'm just talking about just being a new person. Like you're not drinking, you're not drugging, you're not doing things. Wow, I could go do this. And so I did some commercial real estate, and then I left that career to go become a college career counselor. And then I left that in a 35-foot motorhome to travel the country and inspire students to be more than what they think they can be. It was called The Momentum Journey. That was my first book I wrote. And there's so many God shots in this that what I know true in my life, and probably yours and your listeners, is when I seek God intentionally, he speaks to me.
Yeah.
And my life, whether it's shaping out to be the way I want it to be in the moment, is going wherever he wants me to go. And when I step into that, I am much more peaceful. I'm much more chill. And I love that part of my life and walk with God. But when I take it back, the power back, it just goes a mess. And over time, so I met my wife in 2006. Jen, we loved Jesus. We loved board games and coffee and all this, right? And had big plans that God had in our life. And over time of being a father, a husband, and then our son was born in 2007. And then I started a new career in 2008, which went belly up in 2011. And my daughter, so in the middle of all this important, great things, life got too busy and I stopped going to AA meetings. I stopped going to Celebrate Recovery. I stopped going to Bible studies. I stopped working out. I stopped doing the things that were good for me.
And then
I stopped pursuing God, and I was in this chaos of gambling debt, losing a business. My wife and I weren't doing well. All these things were nothing was really going well in my life. And so in 2012, after I lost my career in 2011, just due to sales and production numbers, I was dealing with suicide ideation again, self-hatred, just where I was back the night, like the 6 months before I got sober. And one night I was just up late, and I was just kind of, I was a late owl, and I was just up late. And the way I describe this, men, if you're listening, we have this ridiculous ability, which is not healthy, to compartmentalize our life. Women, I know, can do this too, but I just see it more in men, to compartmentalize our life. And I can disconnect family from work, from faith, from all this. And my brain was like a waffle, I called it. And there were these walls in between all these sections of my life. And so this particular night, Valentine's Day, February in 2012, my wife and I were up late. We watched this really inspirational movie after a fun night with our kids. And it was called 7 Days in Utopia. And it's a movie about kind of like this golfer that was never good enough for his dad. And he kind of like his life went to crap, if you will. Right. And he was just never good enough for his dad. And he meets this other man. He turns him around. It's really an inspirational movie. But for me, I felt like I was never good enough for my wife. I felt like I had failed. I was a loser. So the whole movie I identified with the negative stuff because I can't see the positive redemptive stuff. I see what the enemy wanted me to see that night. And so I was up late and just got up to organize our townhouse because it was a mess due to something that happened the year before. And all of a sudden, now I can look back on this and I understand Rob at that moment. But in that moment, I didn't understand Rob. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And sometimes I call it like driven by the subconscious. And I don't know what was going on this night, but I got up to organize the townhouse. And in a mental blackout, I had grabbed some matches and lit some boxes on fire on my covered patio in a townhouse community in Lakewood, Colorado. And in that moment, I couldn't stop what had started. And so our whole townhouse, the patio went up. I had to run upstairs and wake my wife and kids up at 1:30 in the morning and get them out of the house, get my neighbors out of the house. You know, just it was chaos. There were fire trucks and cop cars. I mean, it was like a war zone in that moment. And when we walked out of our townhouse, the whole back patio exploded and it would sound like a bomb went off. And I'm sitting there going like, what the hell just happened? You know, how did I get here? Right? No alcohol, no drugs, but I was gambling. I was risk taking. I was living I was just like in a complete disconnected from what was going on in a sense, because I was a person in their right mind does not do stuff like that.
No.
You know, and so there's this moment where our whole world got shaken. Our neighbors' world got shaken. The community got shaken. And I had to start this journey of what the hell happened to Rob again.
Right.
And my wife had to start her journey of what the hell happened to my husband. Is he crazy? Do I stay with him? Yeah. So she had to go through her own journey of, God, what do you want me to do? And I had to go through my own journey of, God, what happened?
Yeah. Wow.
And long story short, it ended up me going to prison for a while. And there's so many God stories in all of this too. And I know we're kind of getting the end of the time here as well, but God showed up in so many amazing ways, but that doesn't erase the hurt that was caused.
No.
You know, it doesn't, even though God showed up and you're like, oh, look at these miracles that God did through all of this. It still hurt going through it. And it still does today. You know, I mean, when you leave your family and go to prison and your wife becomes a single mother.
Yeah.
Right. Not
how
knowing
many years?
What's that?
How many years were you in prison?
Well, I was supposed to be gone. So my sentencing was anywhere from 2 years of work release to 56 years in prison.
Holy smokes. What did you?
That was my range. And so obviously we had trusted God 100% with going into an open sentencing situation. So I was sentenced to 13 years in prison, 8 years. It was an 8-year sentence and a 5-year sentence. And so I went to prison for the 5-year sentence, and God got me out in 10 and a half months into a halfway house here, 7.2 miles from my house. And I was there for 11 months on a charge that they don't let into halfway houses because it was arson. And my case manager, when I was gone, when I was in Delta Correctional Facility, he said, Rob, you know, I'm a Christian too. And I think that's great that God spoke to you. Like literally, I was reading Mark Batterson's book, The Circle Maker, and God said, quit praying for things I've already promised you.
Ooh, interesting.
Praise me for them. So he promised me that I would get the first round of halfway houses and that he healed my marriage. And I got the first round of halfway houses and got out in 10 and a half months. And so because he promised me that, like, I wasn't surprised at all, Mary. I was just grateful. It wasn't like, oh, I can't believe that happened. No, he told me that would happen. Wow. And so, I mean, since being out, you know, it's been a journey, right? You know, having felonies on your record and looking at that as an obstacle or an opportunity. And I saw this as an opportunity to be creative. Right. So then I got trained. A friend of mine said, hey, you should become an interventionist and a recovery coach. So I got trained, become an interventionist and recovery coach and started my own business. Right. And then I've been helping families ever since then. And, my wife and I still go through our journey of the pain and the hurt of that, of financial restitution and all sorts of things that come along with that. But shouldn't have said but. What I meant to say was and. When we press into God together and individually, there's more clarity that's brought into that.
Yeah.
And when we try to do it on our own separately, so God is in this. He always has been. He continues to have big plans, and I continue to step into other families' mess to help them really see that there's hope in whatever the situation is. Just never lose hope. And I get to share our story, and they're like, holy cow, like there is hope.
I once heard we're best positioned to serve who we once were. And I do feel, as you alluded to earlier in this conversation, why am I going through all this? I had to go through all this in order to serve people in the future. But I think it's actually so beautiful because not everybody rises. Not everybody comes up from the ashes. And it is a decision to say yes to the Lord in the mess or at some point during that journey. And I think it's just an unbelievable way to honor him to say yes to it then to help others coming out of it. And I do feel like I've been working in opposition of that for a long time. I feel like I took my corporate gifts and talents and I've been in the marketplace and I just keep taking these corporate jobs after corporate job after corporate job and I can do it and it makes a lot of money and we've built a lifestyle around that. But my heart is feeling this pull in this season with the nonprofit ministry that I'm launching. And I just know the Lord is opening the door for me I have said yes. And like you said, it's one of those promises. I've been on a journey. It has been, as many of us have, but to be able now to say that I get to serve who I once was and in a way that I think is going to be meaningful and transformative and having him shape what this is looking like. It changes every day.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful and excited to be on that journey. And I just think of what you have gone through and the blessing that you are to people. It's hard when you're in a coach type role. We'll just use that word very loosely, to gain the ear and the trust and the heart of the person that you're serving if you haven't gone through it. That could be in any coach, teacher position, manager, leader. I think you truly are best positioned to serve who you once were. And what a blessing that the Lord can work through you in that work to guide these people along the journey he has for them. And you get to play such an incredible role in that. Yeah, it's hard. We've both had some difficult things to go through, but praising God and giving thanks in all circumstances and being able to be positioned in the current place that we're in right now to go back to this community and to be able to help guide them and live life with them and through the muck and to be able to guide. I just think it is such a blessing and such an honor to be chosen for this work.
Yep, I agree. And there's so many cool things coming out in 2025 that
oh yeah,
I can't share a couple of them yet because 2025 is going to be pretty dynamic. I'm excited. So.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Okay, so I have one last question to ask you, and then I have to wrap us up. What is your advice to our audience on how to have fearless faith?
Oh wow, go read Hebrews. Go read the book of Hebrews. And I mean, just thinking about chapter 11 and how dynamic it is that those heroes of the faith that just stayed with it. Even though it was so confusing and not understanding, but they stayed with it. And in the end, oh my gosh, it's so amazing like that. And that's when I think of the way I want people to remember me is kind of being one of those heroes of the faith that just never quit, never gave up. So just stay with it and step into it. And God, it might be 10 years from now. It might be 10 minutes from now. It might be whatever, but there's just a cool redemptive story in all of us. So just step into it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Hebrews chapter 11, go read the whole thing. And maybe that'll inspire you to be one of those fearless people in the faith.
Yeah, that is so good. That is a direct command to go get into the word. And I love it. And it's specific. And I do agree with you. There are people who were tried and tested, and those who prospered and those who faltered. And it's a great place to direct people. So thank you so much for that confident word and direction. That is very powerful. So I just want to close us out with asking you how people can get in touch with you. Please tell us. I know you've got multiple URLs here, easy for me to say that you sent me. And where do you want people to go?
Yeah, the world of URLs, right? It's pretty fun. So liftedfromtherut.com is where everything is available you can check out. But if you want to grab a free copy of my addiction intervention book, you can just go to freerecoverybook.com and grab a free copy. You just pay shipping and handling, but it's just kind of a cool way to say thanks for whatever. And hopefully it'll be an influence and help to people.
I love that so much. Okay. Your story is also super inspirational. You are a speaker and you do have a website specifically marketing that with roblohmanspeaks.com. And so I do encourage people who listen to this, who do bring in speakers for their events, to check that out from one speaker to another. I just always want to make sure we're calling it out so people know we're available. We have content. We have rehearsed it. We know how to be in front of an audience. We can make that event very powerful for you. So Rob, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing the story.
You're awesome. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, as are you. And with that, audience, I'm going to say thank you so much for tuning in to another week. We are grateful for you. Rate, review, subscribe, share, do all the things, and I will see you next week. Until then. That's it for today's episode of Fearless Faith. Be sure to connect with me, Mary Grothe, Grothe, on all social platforms, and to learn more about my keynote speaking and other ways to work with me at marygrothe.com.